Now we're going to be talking about how to multiply and divide integers today. And multiplying and dividing integers tends to be a lot easier than adding and subtracting them. But let's take a look at what we're doing. So again, an integer is a positive and negative whole number. And when we talk about multiplying, we're actually talking about repeated addition. So 2 times 4 means that we can either add 4 2 times, or we can add 2 4 times. I'm going to go ahead and set this up to say that we're going to add 4 2 times. So I've got 2 parentheses set up here, and in each of these parentheses I'm going to put 4. So in the end, we're going to end up with positive 8. Now our next problem of 2 times negative 4, that means we've got 2 groups of negative 4. And again, when we add those up, we're going to end up with a total of negative 8. Seems pretty easy. Let's go ahead and try the next set. We've got 3 times 4. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 groups of 4. I've got positives here. And in the end, when it's all said and done, I'm going to end up with positive 12. Three times negative 4, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do 3 groups that we're adding together, and each of the groups contains negative 4. And in the end, I should end up with negative 12. So we can see from up above, if we do 2 times positive 4, we end up with positive 8. If we do 2 times negative 4, we end up with negative 8. When we look at these, the next group here, we see that when we have 3 times positive 4, we end up with a positive 12. If we do 3 times negative 4, we end up with a negative 12. So it seems to be that if we're multiplying by a positive, we end up with a positive. If we're multiplying by a negative, we end up with a negative. So if we follow that thought, then what we should end up with down below, if we do 4 times positive 4, we should end up with positive 16. And 4 times negative 4 should end up being negative 16. Now let's take a look at this in a different way. Let's say that I have negative 2 times 4. You'll notice I set up the problem in the same way, that I have 4 positives and I'm doing it twice. But I have a negative 2 here. What that means is instead of adding 2 4 times or adding 4 2 times, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 4 2 times. So what we really have is negative positive 4 minus positive 4. So if we wrote that out, it would look something like this. Negative 4 minus 4. Well, we know from our previous lesson that that's negative 8. Looking at this one, we're going to do the same thing. So the negative 2 out front means that we need to subtract our groups instead of adding them. So in this case, we're going to have negative 4 minus negative 4. Now the cool thing is that those double negatives here become a positive because we can subtract by switching both signs, which means in the end we end up with positive 8. Okay, same thing down below. So here we've got negative 3 times 4. So I'm going to subtract all of the groups instead of adding them, which means I've got negative 4 minus 4 minus 4. That's negative 12. Here again, I'm going to do minus 4, but I'm going to subtract it 3 times instead of adding. And the reason I'm subtracting it 3 times is I'm multiplying by a negative 3 instead of a positive 3. That means we're going to have minus minus 4, minus minus 4, minus minus 4. And if we do a little sign changing so we can add, remember to subtract, you just change both signs. We're going to end up with positive 12. Now, we need a rule for this. So here's our rule. If you have double negatives, you end up with a positive. For instance, if we look at these two guys right here, we've got a negative right here and a negative right here and a positive answer. A negative here, and we ended up with a positive answer. On the ones up above them, we have a single negative, ended up with a negative answer. Single negative, ended up with a negative answer. So the ones down below, the 4 by 4, let's try those. We know 4 times 4 is 16. We have one negative, so we should end up with a negative answer. 4 times 4 is 16, but this time we have two negatives. We should end up with a positive answer. So, we need a rule. So we need a rule here. So here we go. If we have an even number of negatives, then we're going to have a positive answer. So an even number of negatives is positive, which means an odd number of negatives is going to be negative. Now, let's talk through some examples here. So let's say I have negative 4, and I'm multiplying that by positive 3. 4 times 3 is 12. We have a single negative. That makes it an odd amount of negatives. So our answer is going to be negative 12. Now let's say I have something like negative 2. I'm multiplying that by negative 2, and then I'm going to multiply that by negative 6. Okay, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 6 is 24. Now I'm going to count up the number of negatives I have. 1, 2, 3. This is an odd number of negatives, so my answer is negative. Now if I looked at this a different way, I could think of it as negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And when I multiply that by negative 6, I end up with negative 24 because I only have one negative. So you can either do it in parts, where you put the first two together, you take that solution and put it with the last one, or you can just multiply them straight across, remembering if you have an odd number of negatives, your answer is negative. If you have an even number of negatives, your answer is positive.